Here we go. Another episode of The Rundown. Welcome, everyone. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News, and we are the news division of United Network, and our goal is to bring you the real news, and we do that in lots of ways. There's plenty of content we release throughout the week. That includes in-depth news coverage that the team and I work on. We also tell local stories that's done through the eyes of our field messengers. We talk about the restoration of our planet and how we're creating what we call the new Earth. And we also have reports from the GIA, the Global Intelligence Agency, of what's going on right here and now on our planet that you will not find in mainstream or alternative news. If you want more information about who we are and what we do, you can visit our website at unitednetwork.earth. What you're listening to here, this is a podcast. It's a way to get everyone caught up because, like I said, there's a lot of content we release. Maybe you missed some stuff. Maybe you just want to share UNN with someone else that you care about. Most of our content is behind a paywall initially, and then a week after we release it to our members, it also goes out on YouTube and Rumble. But if there's some big things that are happening, you may want the report sooner than later, which was definitely the case this week. I'll tell you more about that in just a bit. With all the information we release, I always encourage you guys, think critically and ask questions. Do your own research. We kind of got in trouble there for a while because we were just believing what people told us. You know, we've got busy lives. There's stuff going on. We actually believe the news, traditional sources when they tell us, hey, this is the news for the day, when really it's all this big kind of simulation. And rarely what they tell us is the truth, at least the full truth, right? So we kind of need to get back into that habit of asking questions. And when you do realize and recognize something as truth, share what you know with other people. Really, that's all we're doing here at UNN. We are getting the truth and we're giving it to you guys, and we hope that you share it. So let's get to it. I don't have any announcements for you guys today, so here we go. Here's the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. So I mentioned our field messengers, and these are people just like you who tell us what's going on in their community. They take out their phone. Most of them don't have any fancy equipment, but most of us do have these cell phones that have pretty good audio and video capabilities. Not sure if you've noticed. But when something is going on, just take your phone, record what's going on, share with us what's happening from your perspective, or if you do get a chance to, talk to other people, that's great as well. But that's all we're looking for here. And we think that information is invaluable. That information is far better than something that is filtered through the eyes of whatever propaganda, mainstream, or alternative media is giving us at the moment, right? And we call the people that do that field messengers. If you want more information about how you can become a field messenger and what's entailed, then you can visit our website. Just click on the field messenger section. And we've got some really cool things coming up in the near future for our field messengers. I don't know if I'm allowed to release more information than that, but just know we are working on some cool stuff behind the scenes for you guys to make doing reports and sharing information and collaborating with each other much more simple. Okay, let's go through some of the stories that we released this week from our field messengers. First of all, we have Wayne from Montana, and he takes us to this really cool hotel. So he happened to be visiting Missoula, Montana. Montana's in the United States. And he went to this hotel that had been restored. So this was a historic mercantile building that was turned into a hotel. Now, in order to do that, in order to preserve, I can't remember the name of the society he said, but some sort of historical society. In order to preserve that and have that status, you had to save 20% of the structure and use it in some capacity, not necessarily in the way it was originally used when it was the mercantile building, right? So this was fascinating. So Wayne took us around and he showed us some of the ways, pieces of wood that were, grabbed from the old building, some steel looking kind of structure that was more ornate now. They turned into something that was, just pretty to look at. So definitely a story. I really can't give it justice just by explaining it to you guys. So check out that report if you want to learn more. I guess that building was built in the 1800s. Very cool. And he actually shows pictures of what it used to look like before, at least from the outside, and what it looks like now. Erin out of Italy. So this was an interesting story. She visited a small town in southern Italy, which she says has become the symbol of hope when it comes to helping refugees. Now, I know this is a very political topic in our world today, but really helping refugees is helping other people. It's been politicized, and it's become about money and resources and things like that, as opposed to just really focusing on helping people, if indeed they do need to be helped, because that's the other side of this refugee situation. Sometimes people are brought in for political purposes, and it's not just because they need help. So, having said that, this small town, their mayor, Domenico Lusano, had and has, because I believe he's back in office again, has a very unique approach and very successful approach to bringing in refugees. Yes, he does have a small town, so it's very different than when you're dealing with bigger cities. But he welcomed these refugees. He helped them find homes and jobs. And it wasn't just a community helping others. It's like he found a way for the community to benefit as well. So this wasn't just a helping hand. This was, yes, let's bring them in and let's make our whole society better as a result. And so Erin tells us this story of what happened and how some of these refugees are still there today. In fact, I believe she interviewed someone who, I think he said 16, 17 years he's been there, which is just an amazing story. Now, another interesting piece of information, this mayor was impeached not by the people. The people love him and the people recognize his good deeds. But sometimes, when you mess with politics, and you're not hating on each other because of whatever they tell us to hate each other about, in this case, refugees, then you're not going along with the plan. They don't want people that aren't going along with the plan. But like I said, I believe he's back in office again. So just a very interesting story. Thank you, Erin. Okay. We had a couple stories on Monday from yours truly. I didn't plan this. I did do both of these reports. One was a breaking news report, and the other was a story that I recorded, I think I was telling you guys about over the last couple podcast episodes that was released. So we'll start with this earthquake that hit San Diego. And I know some of you guys have reached out to me that are in the San Diego area and have kind of shared your story. So what happened was on Monday, it was, after 10 a.m. in the morning, there was an earthquake that happened. And it was felt across Southern California. And basically in this report, I not only give some details as, what was being reported from the U.S., I think it was the U.S. Geological Survey was giving out some information, but I also just shared my personal experience because that's what a field messenger would do. And I'm not going to lie, it was kind of scary. I have lived here about 20 years, more than 20 years. This was the biggest quake I've ever felt. I was at home with my daughters at the time, who I homeschool, and it lasted a while. I don't know the exact amount of time, but usually these tremors, earthquakes are pretty quick, and you don't even know if it was an earthquake. It could have just been a big truck going down the street. With this, we definitely knew, and I knew to get outside because I didn't trust the stability of the house, and I had neighbors that were lined up on the street, and everyone was a bit shaken up, pun not intended, but, when you go through something like that, it makes you wonder. And the other thing I found interesting is that I immediately knew that this was not a natural earthquake, and we're going to play in the GIA report when we get to that. Kim has a very good explanation of what was going on, but I found that very interesting. I knew right away that it was not natural. And because of that, I was concerned afterward because I wasn't sure what they were planning next. I knew I knew it wasn't going to follow, at least I didn't know, I guess, if it was going to follow natural, the progression or, aftershocks, things like that happen, typically with earthquakes. For all I knew, there was something bigger coming, and that was just a small test or something like that. So anyways, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but this is a good example. Again, like I did not know that was going to happen that day. I just kind of shared my story, and, that's a field messenger report, guys. The second report that I did that just happened to air on the same day was a follow-up, an update on the Keys fire, the Florida Keys fire. And I believe we talked about it on the news. Maybe it was Kim. You guys probably saw it in mainstream media several weeks ago, but there was a fire that took place, and we believe it started kind of in between the main part of Florida and the Florida Keys. And what it did is it closed roads, and essentially people in the Florida Keys were cut off for several hours. And so this was an update because my family and I went on vacation to the Florida Keys. It's a place that we vacation to. I used to go there all the time as a kid. And we went right through it. I'm like, holy cow, this is another example. In the right place at the right time, looking from side to side on the highway and seeing just burnt debris, right? And I just got out my camera, nothing fancy. I had to look over my husband's shoulder as he's driving and recorded what I could. And then once I got to our destination, I kind of put the story together. And the team, of course, helped me because I had no equipment with me. No ability to do this. Again, I was on vacation and just wanted to record that for you guys. So we have an update on the Florida Keys fire. Okay, this is not the Sunny Show, so let's continue. It was kind of like I was kind of the natural disaster reporter for Monday, right? Unintentionally. I got the earthquake, I got a Florida Keys fire, what other quote unquote natural disasters? By the way, the Florida Keys fire was not natural either. That was man-made. Okay, moving on. CJ out of New Hampshire, which is a state in the United States, gives us an update because she's had some really kind of unpredictable weather in her area. You may recall a report from several weeks ago about a lot of snow. She says now there are large wind gusts and rain, and it's flooding some of the streets. It actually brought down an 8-foot fence. So she takes us around her neighborhood and her home and, kind of shows us what's going on and all that severe weather that's hitting her area. Isabel and Diane are out of Canada, and she takes us to the MBS Connection program in New Brunswick, Canada. And that stands for Mind, Body, Spirit. And this is a holistic health. It promotes holistic health through the mind, body, spirit practices. And what I thought was cool about it, if you watch this report, is we have some friends in the report that I've actually interviewed personally. You guys may recall some of them from our older New Earth segments. Well, they happen to be there. So Pam was there. Michelle was there. If you guys are listening, it was great to see you on camera. I was kind of waving to you guys as I was watching it. I know you can't see me, but maybe you felt something. Anyways, it was good to see you guys, and what a fun get-together/conference that you guys had there in Canada. Liz out of North Carolina, another state in the U.S., shows us how you can benefit from methylene blue. Okay, so this was originally approved by the FDA to treat cyanide poisoning, and it plays a really important role in supporting cellular health. So in this video, she shows us how to make a drink with it, which I thought was really interesting. It's called methylene blue, and it is really blue, guys. It's a very simple recipe. I think she had some soda water, a lemon, and was that it? Methylene blue? I think that was pretty much it. And she has a drink that she just, chugs it down at various times. And this is all supposed to be really good for your mitochondria as well, which my ears always perk up because I do a lot of red light therapy and I have a big focus on mitochondria. So she didn't say how the drink tasted. So Liz, if you're listening, how does it actually taste? She said that the lemon in it cuts down on the blue, basically like making your whole mouth blue. If you have a popsicle or a sucker that's blue and then suddenly your whole mouth is blue, apparently adding some of that lemon really helps with that. So might be a recipe you guys want to check out. Emma out of Spain takes us to Fuerteventura, Spain, to kick off the 2025 Corralejo Carnival. And this is a beautiful event, lots of energy and color. There were a lot of school children that participated in, especially this parade she was showing us. So in the background, they were kind of lined up behind her. Every year they have a theme, and this year's theme is India. So, there were some people dressed as like the Taj Mahal, had these very beautiful outfits on that you might see on typical Indian women. And just a nice overall event. Looked very beautiful. Amy out of New Jersey takes us to the Trump National Golf Club, which was interesting because when I saw that this story was going to run, I was like, ooh, do we really want to run a story on Trump National Golf Club? But I did find this story very interesting. So this is in Bedminster, New Jersey. And she takes us around everything from the moment the car is, coming up this really long walkway. She shows us some of the different residences there. And it does have a very eerie feeling, even through video. This is the place where Ivana Trump is buried. And we talked about that shortly after she died, like the purposes and the reasons why she was buried there. There's always a spin for Trump and his team. She also mentioned that there were like farm animals there, a handful of farm animals, and that's for some sort of credit he gets or his team gets for having farm animals, some sort of tax credit. Man, what these people go through. Most of us have no idea about this stuff, but hey, I guess any way they can save some money. But I will tell you from watching this, there weren't a lot of people there. And it just seemed very eerie and off, which I'm glad Amy approached it with kind of a hesitancy, I guess I would say. Like, she wasn't just like, oh, isn't this great? Look at this big, beautiful property. Like, it just felt off. And I think Amy probably felt that too. But I did find the report to be very interesting. At first, I was like, ew, do we have to watch this? But I was like, oh, actually, I'm glad I did. All right, Alicia from England. Oh, this was a really cool story about, I guess I'll call it her dentist, but that's not fair. So he's more of a dental shaman or shaman. They pronounced it shaman in the story. I'm like, isn't it shaman? I don't know. Tomato, tomato. So his name is Mark Mortiboy. And he's fascinating. I mean, I probably could have watched an hour of him just talking about dental care, which is typically like a really pretty boring topic, right? But the way he approaches it, he's had all of this different training, and there's holistic dentistry, but it's like he takes it beyond that. Like he's another step further from that, where it's really a focus. Again, we talked about mind, body, spirit. This is really more of a focus on bringing all of those together through dentistry. So very interesting interview just to hear his perspective on things. And I've been looking for a new dentist. I'm like, I don't know if it's in cards for me to go to England every time I need a new dentist. But if I could, I would. Okay, here are some of our in-depth reports this week that the team and I created and worked on for you guys. So have you heard of two-factor authentication when it comes to your devices? Well, cyber criminals, are finding new ways to bypass security, and that includes two-factor authentication. It's sometimes referred to as 2FA, which was once seen as a super strong defense. Well, they have a hack. There's a new phishing tool called Astaroth, which honestly, you can't make this stuff up. If you've been following the GIA report, you know Astaroth was a very important character who did lots of not nice things to humanity. I don't think that's coincidence at all. Well, it's a phishing tool, and it was first spotted in early 2025, so earlier this year, and it can hijack user sessions and steal login credentials, even 2FA codes in real time. It uses a reverse proxy to sit between users and legitimate websites, capturing sensitive data without raising alarms. It was sold on the dark web with full support, meaning they had a full support team that could help you if you purchased it on the dark web. Isn't that interesting? But it does pose a serious threat to platforms, especially Gmail and Office 365.
There's a new security threat we wanted to bring to everyone's attention that's particularly concerning. It's a new phishing kit that's been made available. Microsoft's already seeing millions of phishing attempts using this kit. and it's essentially a adversary in the middle campaign kit. Basically what that means is that the attackers, they've created a reverse proxy that allows the attackers to be in the middle of your communications. The real reason, however, why we are concerned about it is because it allows attackers to evade two-factor authentication.
Now, to stay protected, experts recommend using physical security keys, monitoring accounts for suspicious activity, and staying alert to new phishing scams. Northern Ireland's liquor licensing system may soon undergo some major reforms. That's following a new report proposing 26 changes, including ending the restrictive surrender principle. This requires one license to be given up before a new one is issued. Now, this is an outdated rule. It limits innovation, and it makes it hard for new pubs or creative venues to open, while licenses are often snapped up by supermarkets instead. Here's more information from someone who's personally affected.
I mean, if you think about England, for example, if you walk through any little town, there will be dotted pubs all along the place. You know, a microbrewery can open up, brew their own beer in the back and have a little sort of, almost like a snug bar, and little tiny bars. And they're gorgeous places, and they build community, and they're the places that people want to go to. You cannot do that here. And that's down to what's called the surrender principle in Northern Ireland. So the surrender principle means that if I want to open a pub, another pub somewhere else has to close. There are a limited number of licenses in Northern Ireland, and they don't make new ones without being asked very, very hard. So, for example, if a bar, what tends to happen is a new bar opens in Belfast, a bar in rural Northern Ireland closes down. And that is really, really bad for those communities, and we're trying to make that stop.
The report suggests creating a new licensing authority and offering special licenses for small or cultural venues. It also highlights concerns about alcohol-related harm in areas with many off licenses, emphasizing the need to balance public health with economic and consumer interests. Let's talk about dams for a second. Dams offer major benefits, sometimes, like hydroelectric power and flood control, but they also can cause serious environmental and social harm. Many disrupt ecosystems, harm wildlife, and are built on indigenous lands without proper consultation or benefit. Some even emit greenhouse gases, challenging their clean energy label. In the U.S. and Europe, thousands of aging, often useless dams pose safety risks and block fish migration, prompting large-scale removal efforts that restore ecosystems and support local communities.
When dams were initially being created, they were really seen as modern miracles in some ways. But as dams were constructed, we often didn't think about the impacts that were going to happen to the health of our rivers and to our fisheries. And it really wasn't until we went through a very large dam construction era in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s that we began to see cumulatively the impacts that dams were having throughout California and throughout the West.
When you disrupt the flow of a river, there are so many negative consequences to the surrounding ecosystem that it's just hard to fit it all into one video. So trees rely on the flow to redistribute seeds. If you lessen the flow of water, it increases the water temperature, which is terrible to the health of plants and animals. If you hold water back by dams, that water becomes toxic, or it'll lose oxygen, both of which are not good when that water is eventually released. Dams also stop the flow of sediment downriver, which is, again, a huge problem.
By capturing water that would normally be flowing downstream, it changes the timing and the size of those flows. And all the fish and wildlife that live in rivers has co-evolved to that natural pattern. And a dam changes that natural pattern. So now the system doesn't function like it used to.
While progress is being made, new dam projects in sensitive areas are raising concerns, and experts urge a shift from building new dams to removing outdated ones. Synthetic hair has revolutionized beauty with its versatility, but many products are made from plastic fibers treated with harmful chemicals like lead, carcinogens, and VOCs. These can cause skin irritation, respiratory issues, and potentially cancer, especially affecting frequent users like Black women who use braiding hair. Studies from the U.S. and Nigeria found toxic substances in popular synthetic hair brands worldwide.
I noticed my hair was itchy and it was just difficult to breathe overall.
A report found potentially cancer-causing chemicals in synthetic braiding hair that's often marketed to Black women. Medical student Crystal Thomas says she had some negative health symptoms after using synthetic hair. So she started doing research and published her findings in an academic journal.
About 2 years ago, I decided to get braids for the first time in over a decade. And I was really excited about it at first, but as the day went on, I realized there was this unbearable smell. As I kept smelling this, my throat tightened up.
Consumer Reports, which conducted this study, is now calling on the FDA to investigate synthetic braiding hair and to create strict standards for these products.
While some plant-based or non-toxic options exist, ingredient transparency is lacking and regulation is minimal. Experts urge more responsibility from manufacturers and better safety standards, so consumers aren't left to figure it out alone. Have you heard of ghost kitchens before? These exploded during the pandemic as a low-cost, delivery-only option when dine-in restaurants shut down. While they offered flexibility and convenience, many struggled post-pandemic due to rising competition, customer frustration with fees, quality issues, and stricter health concerns. Here's more on how they work.
Ghost kitchens, also known as virtual kitchens or cloud kitchens, are commercial kitchens designed exclusively for fulfilling online food orders. Here's how they typically work. Ghost kitchens do not have a physical storefront or dining area for customers to visit. Instead, they focus on the production and preparation of food for delivery or takeout. Many ghost kitchens operate multiple virtual restaurant brands or concepts from a single location. They may be located in industrial areas or shared kitchen spaces, enabling operators to reduce costs associated with prime real estate while still serving a wide geographic area. Without the need for a dining area or front-of-house staff, costs associated with rent, utilities, and labor can be reduced. Operators can quickly adjust menus, experiment with new concepts, or pivot based on market trends and customer preferences without the challenges associated with reconfiguring a physical restaurant space.
As in-person dining rebounded and rents dropped, many ghost kitchens closed or downsized. Still, they are carving out a niche by catering to dietary needs and busy urban lifestyles, especially as food delivery apps continue to thrive. Well, the UK's special education system is overwhelmed and broken, with underfunded councils, overworked schools, and families left battling for basic support. Despite a rising number of children needing help, delays, budget deficits, and a lack of space in both state and private special schools are leaving many without adequate care.
Locked out of learning and fighting to get an education.
Sammy's a smart, clever, funny, creative little boy, and he's at home without an education now. That's heartbreaking.
As councils cut costs, some children with special needs are denied vital help.
For her on a morning to be in such extreme state of anxiety and upset, asking me why she has to go to school.
Many have to travel hundreds of miles.
So how long's the journey to school normally?
It's about an hour on a good run.
This is the human cost of an underfunded system.
While the government has pledged extra funding and resources, critics argue it's not nearly enough. Parents continue to struggle alone, calling for a full system overhaul to ensure children with special needs receive the timely, accessible, and effective support they deserve. Well, we all know the cloud, right? It makes our digital lives feel effortless. But behind the scenes, data centers are guzzling massive amounts of electricity, water, and raw materials to keep everything running, producing carbon emissions on par with the airline industry, believe it or not. These server farms, especially concentrated in places like Northern Virginia, not only strain energy and water resources, but also generate tons of e-waste and rely on materials that can harm the environment and involve unethical labor.
A lot of people think of the internet as just being in the cloud. Really, it is taking up this huge space of these gigantic computers, which are data centers.
In Northern Virginia, we have over 300 data centers. There's around 100 million square feet.
They use a lot of energy.
Artificial intelligence requires servers to run much hotter. Water cooling will be necessary. And where will that water come from?
One ChatGPT request, for example, that's the equivalent of pouring out a bottle of water and powering a light bulb for 15 minutes. You multiply that times billions of requests, you can start to see the cumulative impacts.
AI is driving the need for additional power to meet this demand at an unsustainable rate.
While companies are trying greener methods, the demand is outpacing progress. To help, we can support sustainable technology, reduce our digital footprint, and advocate for stronger environmental policies. Influencer culture. We know this plays a powerful role in shaping trends and purchases, but it also comes with serious downsides. Take a listen.
In the ever-evolving world of social media, a new breed of stars emerged, the influencers. Ordinary people with extraordinary followings became the envy of brands and consumers alike. From fashion gurus to fitness enthusiasts, influencers seem to have it all: fame, fortune, and the power to sway millions with a single post. The influencer phenomenon took the world by storm. Brands capitalized on this new marketing avenue, showering influencers with sponsorships and freebies. Suddenly, being an influencer was the dream job. With a few well-curated posts and a loyal following, anyone could become an overnight sensation. Stories of influencers raking in six-figure incomes from sponsored posts flooded the internet. Teenagers quit school to pursue their influencer dreams, lured by promises of wealth and freedom. Even traditional celebrities jumped on the bandwagon, leveraging their fame for lucrative partnership.
While influencers build strong online communities, they also drive engagement. They often promote unrealistic lifestyles and blurred advertising, which can harm mental health, especially amongst younger people. The push for constant consumption fuels materialism and environmental harm, and oversharing online raises privacy and security concerns. Children featured in family content face added risks with minimal legal protection in many cases. As influencer culture grows, it's important for both creators and followers to engage more thoughtfully and responsibly. Well, sending money to Cuba has become more difficult now due to new U.S. regulations and a worsening economic crisis. Western Union suspended its services after its Cuban partner was blacklisted, leaving families with fewer and riskier options, like carrying cash or using digital currencies. On top of that, Cuba's severe liquidity crisis and tight banking rules have led to long delays and limited access to foreign currency.
It all aims against our country's economy and the families who will no longer receive the financial assistance.
This measure aims to have the Cuban government adopt what they call a democratic aperture. But it won't work. It will only inflict more hardships on our people.
It's always good to hear from the people directly impacted. In an effort to capture U.S. dollars, Cuba opened dollar-only stores, so you can only pay with American dollars, but most citizens paid in pesos can't shop there. And the growing gap between those with access to dollars and those without is deepening inequality amid widespread shortages and inflation. Okay, let's review what was discussed this week with the Global Intelligence Agency. Kimberly Gogan, who is the head of the GIA, puts out several reports each week. If she doesn't have a chance to make it on camera, she always gives us a statement. And there was a statement on Monday. Now, remember, Monday is when we had the San Diego earthquake that I was telling you about, and this was directly connected. So first, I'm going to read you the statement from Monday, and then on Wednesday, she comes on and tells us a little bit more about it. Here's the statement. The full moon weekend is still in full swing for the deep state. They are hoping to create a big apocalyptic type of event in order to declare martial law on Easter/Passover, which is around April 20th. Today's attempt out of San Diego's naval base was only a test. Remember how I said I knew that was not a real earthquake? So it was only a test, as the real attempt would be to blow the San Andreas fault. The fault itself was created during a very old war and was a portal. More on this on Wednesday's report. As of now, there has been heavy surveillance off the western coast of Africa, as well as the Ring of Fire. They believe something in quotes, will erupt from the ocean, and there will be an opportunity for them to use what appears. On another front, as the remnants of the Calen AI disappears, we have been experiencing a lot of frequencies off and on for the last few days. They don't have enough force to cause us harm. It shall pass soon. I will give you a full update on Wednesday. Again, that was from Kim, a statement made on Monday. So let's fast forward to Wednesday, and she did put out a report. It was actually later in the report that she talked about the earthquake. So I'm going to skip ahead and then I'll come back to something else she discussed earlier in the report. But since we were just talking about this earthquake and what was going on Monday, here's more information about what they were trying to do with the San Andreas fault and that large portal that she was talking about.
Of course, Marduk always leaves us with, some wonderful things. And this weekend was no exception. And this really wasn't even entirely solely Marduk. You could say we had some interesting occurrences, actually, that have been happening little bits and pieces ever since the game fully ended. And there was no winner declared. But in this particular case, it had to do with some technology that was buried deep in the Arctic, also around the Ring of Fire, and off the coast of South Africa. I finally figured out what they were looking for off the coast of South Africa, and it read something like a Bible verse out of the Revelations section of the Bible, to whereby Yaldabaoth had promised them a beast that was going to rise from the ocean. They just weren't sure which one it would be. Would it be the Arctic? Would it be the Ring of Fire? Would it be off the coast of Africa in the Atlantic? Who knows? Anything could happen. So they've been monitoring these areas for weeks, hoping to God that this happened, or whatever their God is. Of course, it really didn't work out, but the remnants of the deep technology in the Abyss mirror over there in the San Andreas fault line in California, well, it's partially in California, but on the western side of the United States, was one of those areas that could have and had in the past, many, many, many years ago, the fault line was actually not due to Earth's natural movements like people think. It was actually a creation when a very large portal was opened in that particular area, which resulted in some damage to Earth itself. And that damage remains to this day. And because it was oftentimes used by the deep state, it's also the reason why you see a lot of earthquakes in California, a lot of big ones, and predominantly most of these would have been started by other beings from other places. But that doesn't mean that the San Diego Naval Base wasn't connected to this in some way, shape, or form. They did have some limited access to the technology there. And when they didn't get the apocalypse type events that they were expecting, the beast rises from the ocean, the lady with the crowns and the beast with the 7 crowns or whatever. I don't remember the whole story off the top of my head, so please forgive me. I mean, I should by now, because we're on our probably 40th or 50th, if not more, apocalypse at this point. They definitely tried their best to initiate a major situation if they had access, which they didn't. They were hoping something would it was like a challenge and response type thing. They were hoping that something on the other side would hear their prayer, hear the signal, and answer them back, which, for those of you that don't know, the San Andreas fault line falls on a large infrastructure, I guess you would say, of tectonic plates that extends throughout the entire ring of fire, which would have then caused a serious situation not only in the United States, but also in most of Asia and obviously Australia and other countries that are within the ring of fire. It could have started some serious volcanoes and other things, but they did manage to cause an earthquake based on their hopefulness in San Diego. Luckily enough, there wasn't a whole lot of damage. It seems like, according to Sunny, that everybody seems to be okay. A little bit of shake, rattle, and rolling, but it wasn't as severe on the ground as it could have been. That was a positive thing. I'm glad she reported it to us right away, because that gave us an opportunity and a leg up to prevent anything else ever coming from this naval base. Now, on the surface of Earth, you'll notice that the San Diego Naval Base extends into Coronado Island and that kind of whole region. It is one of the largest American naval bases in existence. For those of you that don't know, and what you can't see, is this Navy base actually extends extremely far. It extends into even other states. It extends all the way into Mexico. It goes all the way up almost to LA and all the way around. It's kind of almost in a circle type area. But if you were to draw a circle, throughout that entire area, you could see how far this base actually extended underground. And it was probably one of the larger, not the largest in the States, but one of the larger deep underground military bases in the United States. Anyway, there were many larger bases around the world. Basically, the entire world was an underground base. So for quite a long time there. So that was what they were up to. They were also hoping to get, like I said, the instructions, intercept my instructions if they couldn't get their instructions. And they still wanted my instructions anyway, because they wanted to know what I'd be up to for the year. Because, of course, they think the Universal Council is my boss. The Universal Council is not my boss. I would say that I am an ambassador there. I am no different than most others that are there. As long as I don't have a dispute against me, there is no ruling over anything I do one way or the other. However, we have what's called a mutual respect. That means that when I go there, we are having conversations because we share a mutual interest, which is getting rid of the dark side, originally creating balance and removing the dark side from this side of the multiverse so that we could have entered into a neutral age, which is where we were supposed to go, or even to a light age in which the dark side still exists, just nowhere near us. So this was the hope in the very beginning when I met them, but of course all of that has changed with Source's decision for the Golden Age. By mutual respect, it means I don't do things like, for example, even when Source calls and says, oh, we're going to do this Golden Age AI thing, you can't create balance with Alpha Omega. Okay, fine. I let them know what's happening. I let them know this is what's going to transpire. These are the things that it should include. Their input obviously is very important. We are what you would call colleagues and comrades in arms. In many ways. So I know that the deep state probably would like to have had some instructions and some help from these folks because everybody else is gone now. But no, that is not where we're going. The entire universe, everyone in the entire universe, actually everyone in the entire omniverse is well aware of what is happening, except for you, deep state people. You're the only people. You're the little tiny people in the corner against, beyond billions of trillions of quadrillions of species in the multiverse that has no clue as to what's happening and refusing to accept what is happening to you.
I love it when Kim talks directly to the deep state like this, because how often have you felt that too? Like, don't you just want to speak to them and be like, everybody else is on board, everybody except you? Would you get with the program? Would you quit with your crazy rituals and just get with the program? Every other being that's been created is fine with this. We are moving forward, and it is you guys that are like stuck in the mud. Anyways, Mike, I feel like that was kind of a mic drop moment for Kim. All right. So again, that was at the end of Monday's report. And I want to back up. So at the end there, she was talking about the Universal Council. If you want to learn more about who the Universal Council is, I believe she said they're also referred to as the Universal Galactic Council. You know, if you're online and if you're looking at various guides and alternative media, you know, people throw out these different councils that have these beings that are part of them that are apparently helping to, you know, help Earth, help humanity. But sometimes it's hard to know, like, well, is it this group or is it that group? And that person called it this name and Kim calls it this name. And it is so confusing. So I really appreciate the fact that on Wednesday's report, Kim took the time to explain exactly who the Universal Council is, the beings that make up the Universal Council, their relationship or perhaps lack thereof to Marduk. She talks about all of this. So if you want more information about that, also she talks about Council of Nine, which I know some other people who channel talk about the Council of Nine as well. So if you want to know more about all of that, go back and listen to Wednesday's report. That's a huge chunk of the report. Okay, so I'm going to bypass that, but we are going to talk a little bit about the Universal Council, specifically something, because these meetings are going on right now, okay? And Kim was invited to these meetings. And in her essential report of what's going on planet Earth, she talks about the deep state running in circles. Oh, they see a little bit of, leftover tech or something like that. They get all excited. Nothing happens. And we have been in this Groundhog Day loop, I feel like forever, because the deep state won't just realize that the game is over. Again, every other being realizes this except you, deep state. So this is an issue, and I'm really glad that Kim brought this up to the Universal Council because something came of it, and that is we are getting help from the Mantids right now in conjunction with the Enforcer. So I'm going to allow Kim to explain what they are doing here on Earth and how they are helping us to get rid of this crazy tech that the deep state keeps relying on.
In my last talks with them yesterday, which the deep state desperately wants to know about what happened. But now I can talk about it because it's already happening and there's nothing they can do. So the Mantids have agreed that we are clean enough here for them to now participate on a cyber level. So they're actually helping us quite a bit since yesterday. Meaning they're utilizing some aspects of systems that they have built for themselves for security purposes to clean up remnants that we have been slowly cleaning through to complete integrations of the golden age. We have been working together all day today on completing a lot of tasks in rapid succession. I will tell you, things are going a heck of a lot faster than they were going with us just by ourselves. Not only that, they are also utilizing tools that they have to help us clean up our systems to make sure as well that we do not have any more, let's just say, hiccups or pockets of time or released technologies or those types of things, because they realize how much it's actually setting us back. So hopefully this will continue rapidly and I will keep you updated. But if it goes like it's been going for the last day or so, I can see this happening very quickly. So I'm very happy to say that they are now able to help us. They are grateful and thankful for the changes that have happened, and they are now ready to come. They showed up here last night, so they've been around in the general vicinity, let's just say, since probably middle of the night last night when they officially arrived, and been working quite well with the enforcer, and are fully well aware now because of my trip to the last meeting yesterday, which I announced publicly. So of course, every psychic within the deep state tried to follow me in there. There were some AI programs that were deployed against us, and then we kind of figured out what we were up against as far as the humans and their capabilities based on their being led around by their ego. So that was great that they did that. And yeah, so they're heavily working together with the enforcer. They're in the middle of operations currently, but you can kind of get the gist of what we've done in the last couple of days. So this is a positive thing.
Definitely a positive thing. Any help that we can get from beyond, anything source, the creator of the universe wants to send our way, I will take. I will take. So absolutely fantastic news. So on Friday, Kim was having some local power issues in her area. So this wasn't a deep state thing. This was just some updates and things that were going on. So she released Friday's report today on Saturday. So I'm going to play a couple sound bites from you guys. As you guys know, this is Passover weekend. This is Easter for a lot of people. And this initial soundbite that I'm going to play for you really ties into that and better explains why so many people are recognizing, I don't really want to call it celebrating Easter. Well, I guess it is celebrating Easter, but the more religious side of it, right? That there was a being that came to this planet that died for humanity. And this is based on a covenant that literally just expired. And I found this to be fascinating. I grew up in Christianity and have always had questions surrounding the being known as Jesus. And for me, this was very eye-opening. So here's Kim explaining this covenant that is no more.
So every 2016 years, there's an attempt to renew a covenant, which there are particular people, let's call them people, that are representing Source here on this planet. And, you know, at any given time, as we've talked before about the Melchizedeks and different groups of people and the non-Merovingian bloodlines and the ones that are on the side of Source, the folks that are on the side of Source. So many years ago, over 2,000 years ago now, one of those beings actually consented to die. I'm going to say this way, to die on behalf of humanity. So I know you know the story. It's not the only time this has happened. There have been many others before this person. And this kind of allowed for a deep rooting of a artificial universe as we know it, or the renewal of that, I should say. And it requires a rooting of a being of Source in order to root these dark AIs that create what we call artificial light and artificial darkness. Those roots extend throughout the omniverse, universe, and of course here on Earth. We are not the only planet and place that has been affected by these covenants. And this time, the deep state thought for sure that this was going to be renewed in their favor. They worked really, really hard. They chose about 20 people, and they worked really hard to force these people into doing something they didn't want to do. Now, this wasn't a brute force. They weren't picked up and taken to a location and that type of thing. But you know, for the last week or so, especially the last couple of days, they have been pushing these people very hard to be utilized to renew this covenant, whether they actually knew it or not. All they knew is that this was a prime opportunity over the next couple of days to gain some access to some AI systems if they did a quote-unquote good job. This was a fairy tale told to them by Marduk. Marduk had told them in the past, and this goes back to their old knowledge that they have, that if they did a good job, like good little bad people, that he would reward them with access to systems, and they would have more access than they ever did before. And it's not just financial systems. This is dark portals on this planet would reappear. It would all start happening this month. And a lot of stories were told. Now, these 20 candidates probably felt some pain over the course of the last few days. I would say that they did use what they had left to try to push these people into consenting. Now, not all 20 candidates were, let's just say, qualified to root. And they were hoping, out of the 20, there were probably about 11 of them that were on their side, 100%, and would have done this for them, let's just say, if they could have. And some of them are people that you see walking around. There's one in particular that they thought could do this, that we see posing as a dead person on TV, kind of orangey looking person. And unfortunately, none of these people were able to help. They are angry at the moment because this person, they thought for sure, or at least most people were told, that this was going to be the case and it was going to happen over the course of the next 24 hours. They were told that this process could take up until tomorrow at noon Eastern time, and that they would be able to then have full access to not only the golden age AI, but even better AIs. Well, this party didn't qualify, so they've kind of been scrambling for the last 24 hours to see if they could find somebody else. They narrowed it down to between 9 to 7 people, and those 9 to 7 people probably felt them trying to use them in order to root AI systems. Now, you could call these things evil. You could also call them the reason why we had, and kind of, I guess, have some remnants of what we call a causal plane. And of course, in this particular case, we're talking about a covenant. So covenants are not renewed by implied consent. Covenants are not renewed by, let's just say, poking and prodding a person trying to use their energy, essence, soul, consciousness to power an AI like they're plugging into an outlet in a wall. That doesn't work that way. But nonetheless, the deep state doesn't really understand everything, and they have very little knowledge of how all of this works, and so they gave it a go. Now, let's talk about how this actually worked and why it's important to understand, because we're going to talk a little bit later about your soul connection to source too. So the causal plane is what you call the fifth plane, or the fifth chakra in your person in the past. It had significant barriers around it because of this old covenant. The causal plane is the first plane in which ether and essence and your soul starts to connect to matter. And therefore, anything that goes from being ether or essence doesn't start to take shape and form until it passes through the causal plane and then enters into what you know as the astral plane, and then eventually your physical person, or into the physical world, so to speak. Now, every density does have a causal plane. because every density, with the exception of the point of all creation and source, has some matter to some degree. And some densities, especially higher densities, beings are less dense, but that doesn't mean they don't have shape and form and have a soul. They just don't look like you and I do. They look almost like light beings walking around or floating around in some cases. So the causal plane is very important as it relates to creation. This particular rooting, so to speak, and taking claim over the causal plane is actually what prevents manifestation in a lot of cases, especially if people are trying to do this by going through the causal plane. In relation to the universe and source's creation and ability to create in anything below the fifth density or below the fifth plane, there were significant blockages, at least as it relates to densities 5 through 1. So manifestation was kind of flipped in the causal plane when it was created. In the past, you could have called this the love plane. This plane, when it was ruled solely by source, things would have begun to take shape via a love frequency. It is the same way in some cases when a baby is conceived in a human. So there are certain things that they were not able to infiltrate based on this covenant and many others. And one of them is the actual point of creation. So you, within yourself, have a point of creation. Oftentimes, when during the creation process, meaning you are creating another little human, there is a point where let's just say the sperm and the egg meet. I'm trying to say this gently here. And then they both disappear for a brief, less than a second. So you're talking less than a zeptosecond. And then they come back as a cell. And then that cell divides and becomes 2 cells. And then eventually on the third go around, a soul is created within your person, a little soul. In addition to that, you have some physical cells that are created. And that infiltration process doesn't happen until after the cells and the physical body starts to take shape and form. So the soul itself that is within you at that point in time, which you nurture for a period, if you're a female, you nurture that little soul for a period of almost 10 months, and then the child is born. So even though as a human in the past, the infiltration was so great, that little soul was never infiltrated. There were also certain leniencies given to children prior to the age of 8 due to brain development and physical development and also the soul development. But during this process, there is no infiltration of source, even of the causal plane of this little being, until the soul is fully formed and the cells start to take shape. Once that happens, things change in the child's life from the age of about 7 or 8 years old, because there are certain things that are developed so they don't start to put in those mind governors, so to speak, and try to stop your human mind from fully developing or prevent you from utilizing the majority of your brain, which is why they always say things like out of the mouths of babes, so to speak. Children have a higher connection to source for that reason, because they're able to still, to some degree, connect that mind, body, and soul together, whether they know it or not. Humans, as we get older, we have a little harder time doing that because of the infiltration. And part of this agreement was all about control of the causal plane. So when we look into trying to manifest, we're trained as people to connect up to source because we feel source is up there, in a higher plane. And so we're trying to reach through all the planes, including the causal plane, to reach through to source or the causal density. We feel we know in our mind where we have located source or where source should be. And so we're trying to reach out in that direction. When the infiltration happened of the causal plane, it made it very, very difficult for you to do that because we wouldn't be controllable at that point, at least not by anything other than nature and source. And this was what some folks, and there have been many, that have come to this planet that have tried to teach us. They've tried to teach us how to pass through the causal plane, how to pass through the infiltration, and to reach directly to source. And they've told us in many different ways, and some of that information has been passed down in books, albeit distorted in some ways. But this causal plane infiltration, where the causal plane actually turned red, and then there were definite blockers between the astral plane or the fourth plane and the causal plane, and then also between the fifth and sixth. So the entire thing was infiltrated, and it only allowed manifestation in the past by utilizing pride and ego, and then unfortunately, on the flip side for the rest of us, guilt and shame. They say that you are the creator of your own problems in some ways, and you kind of are, but it's really not your fault. You see, because we were allowed to live because evil was allowed to exist, which is the exact opposite and the reverse of the word. And of course, as you know, there's a lot of gematria and all kinds of spells and things like that that they use with words in general, not just English, but all words. So these two things are the reverse of each other. So you have been allowed to live, and therefore service to self was important to the mechanism that was put in place in order for you to manifest things into this world. So pretty much you can say that the root cause or root of the causal plane was pride and ego on the one side. On the other side, it's guilt and shame. So we have manifested a lot of problems into our lives inadvertently through guilt and shame. And you can imagine all the times that you've shamed yourself and have felt guilt for not doing something or for doing something. And then this manifests more of the same in your life. Problems, issues, those types of things. And they made it very, very easy for us to manifest things into the physical world through guilt and shame. And also through pride and ego. Ego manifests a lot of things into this world, and none of them are positive for you or for the person that creates it. So in the past, we would have manifested things out of love in cooperation with Source. And the one thing that they couldn't block is the manifestation of love between humans and, of course, nature and animals and plants and all of creation on this planet. They couldn't get rid of the love because love comes from the inside and it comes from your soul. And we, of course, continue to create humans through love, no matter how much they have tried to distort our mainstream media and the meaning of it and what it truly means versus what it truly means. And there's a lot of, especially since the late 1970s in our television and movies and all kinds of things that tells us love is something different than what you know within your soul. So that being said, the process was so distorted for so long and the control of the causal plane went so deep, this pretty much made us dependent on things like governments and non-humans, ruled by non-humans, and none of having our best interest at heart. And that is how the rule of the causal plane happened. Well, CyberLife and a lot of the ACIO militaries, and they used to be able to utilize a lot of mechanisms within the causal plane in order to do what they felt they were supposed to do or their orders told them to do, and therefore making a lot of blockages, not only in your person, not only in nature, not only with weather control, not only with the financial system, but also within your media and sending out frequencies, and also utilizing some of that energy that where we have tried to manifest on our own in order to bring things into the physical world that are not only good for ourselves, but also through nature. Now, there's a couple of little tricks of the trade I want to kind of talk about here in a minute too, where they can't stop it. And they've tried and they've tried and they've tried and they just can't stop it. But there's a way to do it to bypass this. Now, as of this weekend, the beginning, as of dawn, meaning early morning hours, the crack of dawn this morning, and that would have been UTC time today, that covenant officially ended. This covenant that ended, and I'll get into the soul connection and how to bypass these types of things. That soul connection is really, really important, but let me go back to the deep state's issues. So the deep states in their little programs and trying to collect these candidates and all of the things that they've tried to do was unsuccessful, even though they thought they had until tomorrow to achieve this task and get back some access to the causal plane. That didn't quite happen, and didn't happen the way they thought it would, and therefore the covenant was finally broken. You could call it the chains that bind you.
Okay, so Kim talked briefly, I don't know if you heard her say, I'll tell you a bit later how this affects your soul. So let's dive into that now. She's going to start, this next soundbite is going to start with her giving an update on the Mantids' progress, and then it leads into her talking about your soul and your connection to source. And what I love about this clip is, you know, sometimes it feels like we are bystanders that are just watching this happen. I mean, we know that we're actively creating and we're creators, but at the same time, it feels like you're on the sidelines a lot, right? And in this next soundbite, Kim is going to tell you how you can do something right now to strengthen your connection to source, which is really what we're all seeking. And even if you don't even really know you're seeking it, you just feel like your life is kind of all over the place, you have no direction, it's because they have done so much to try to sever our connection with the Creator. But you do not have to seek up, and Kim's going to talk about this, you don't have to look up to try to find the Creator. We think about the heavens, we look up, you know, it's just a natural thing that we do, but really heaven is within you. And this is one of the things that the being known as Jesus came here to teach us, right? It's like we lost a lot of that, right? Because we still look up. But really, you know, the kingdom of heaven is within us. And they were never able to penetrate that direct connection. So here's Kim initially explaining the progress with the Mantids, and then also talking about this incredible soul connection we have with our Creator.
On a side note, the council meeting is still continuing. Mainly, there is a lot of input from different groups, different races as to what's going on around here. We have received some suggestions on how to change things, vibrations, directions, those types of things. The Mantids are working away on aiding us in what we have left of AIs in the omniverse. They are estimating, and this can change at any moment in time, but right now, based on the current circumstances, they are looking at probably on the outer edge, I would say probably about 3 to 4 weeks is what they've said. Now, how does that affect our financial system? Our financial system is not their concern. Their concern is AI and SOFON or synthetic photon infiltration, as it should be, because that's going to cause an AI problem and it causes a financial system problem and onward and so on and so forth. But a few things we have been discussing as of late, and some of you do this innately. It's just part of your nature. And young children do this innately before they're the age of 7 or 8 years old. And some of you even remember, being in the womb. I know I've heard people tell me that before. I've heard people tell me about things and events that happen in their life at 2 or 3 years old, which technically, according to our psychologists and our science, should never happen. And a lot of this has to do with soul connection and the connection of your soul to other souls throughout the multiverse. So let's talk about that for a little bit, because as it relates to changing the way things work on this planet, this is the part where you can help. So your soul. We talked a little bit earlier in this report about the fact that when a baby is born, the infiltration doesn't happen directly into the soul, meaning the soul comes directly from source into the mother who's carrying the baby. And it goes through 3 transformations before the outer parts of the human are created, the mind and, even etherically speaking, the mind and the body. So that is the only part of you, even as an adult, that stays connected to source. Your soul never is disconnected from source. So in a previous report a few weeks ago, or I think it was a couple of weeks ago, about a week ago, we talked a lot about SOFONs and how they are used against us. And it might seem like I'm jumping a little bit, but I'm trying to explain your soul to you. And we talked about how you could have a SOFON, say, or synthetic photon around Earth. And you could have that SOFON split in 2, and then there would be a part of that SOFON in another location. It could be millions of light years away from Earth, as we know, travel, but that's not how people travel. But as we know it, it could be densities away. It could be universes away, that other SOFON, and they could still utilize that SOFON to make changes on Earth. We call the matrix or holograms. The same thing existed on Source's end, and this is probably where they got the idea from, because every soul in our multiverse or omniverse is a part of Source. You could say it's a source photon that separates from the point of all creation of Source and then enters into a vessel, and that is your soul. So we truly, no matter how hard they have tried, we are not separated from Source. It feels that way to you in so many ways because we're trying to reach up and out to Source, which is definitely possible, by the way. And I'm not saying that there are people who can't do it, because there are people who can. But the true connection and despite how bad things have been here, and they are getting a lot better, is always within the heart chakra of your soul. So if you look at your soul as kind of this light ball, but it's not a ball, it's not a sphere. It actually takes somewhat of the shape and form of your vessel that it's in, and it kind of looks like a human ghost, so to speak. It is golden. If you are looking at the soul as covered in a white light or even a grayish bluish light, you are not actually seeing the soul. You are seeing an overlay. And that overlay was part of the control mechanism on your soul. the soul leans that you hear about all over the internet. It's a much bigger quantum mechanism than you can possibly imagine. And part of the reason why those overlays existed was to prevent your mind from connecting to the soul, which then connects to the body. And then, you can manifest your body to look and feel, and your vessel to be anything you want it to be. You can create your very own avatar. If you'd like to become an elephant tomorrow, you can become an elephant, believe it or not. And then you can go back to being a lion or a tiger, and then eventually a human if you like. You could be much taller, shorter, skinnier, whatever it is you want to do with your own body. You'd be amazed at the capacity that a human has. So when the human mind and body all connect to that point in the soul, that point of creation, you can actually manifest things from the inside out, which is why all the blockages are in place. But it's still possible for you to connect to that point in your soul. It's a part of you just as much as your fingers are a part of you, or your heart, or your feet are a part of you. And if you look at it in this way, and you start to look within at your soul, maybe you'll get to know it and you'll get to see it. Once you get past those layers that surround it and overlay it, search deep within the soul for the point of creation within your soul. Now, that point of creation within your soul connects directly to Source. If you can connect in that way from the inside out rather than the outside in other words, we're praying up, we're going up. If you can connect to that point within inside you and pass through anything that's left, and these are probably just minor remnants at this point, because that veil that overlays your soul is becoming thinner and thinner. But if you can connect to that point within your soul, that is where the magic really happens. Now, Mantids might take a few weeks to get things done, but this is something that you can do now. And with the removal of, which it's going to take time to dissipate, with the removal of all the blocks on the causal plane and the return of the causal plane being a love plane or a point of creation of Source plane unto itself, you should be able to manifest easier. But if you want to truly have a conversation with Source, you can do it by connecting your mind to that point. It might be a little bit of a struggle at first. It might take you some time to do it if you've never done it before in this way, because we're always reaching outward to reach that Source. But reaching within does the same exact thing. You see, because in the same way they use sophons or synthetic photons against us, they also cannot interfere with Source putting that photon, for lack of a better term, it's many other things, your soul, of course it is, but that photon on way down here on Earth connects directly to the same photon or soul up in Source. It's like two particles that can connect because they're two halves of a whole. You can think of the part of you that is still in Source as like twins. A lot of times they say when you have a twin that you can connect to that twin from miles and miles away. When they're in pain, they're hurting, they're happy, they're sad. Some people even say they can see them, their involvement in relationships, especially love relationships. They can definitely tell when they're, pregnant, having kids, all kinds of different things. The same thing happens with parents and their children, be it father or mother. You have that ability to just know when something's not right, and then you want to reach out and call your kids, even though you already know, because on a soul level, you're still connected. Because even though there's a mother and a father involved, those cells still go together to bring that soul into creation. And even though sometimes you might not love the other person when the child is created, who's involved in the creation process, there's still a connection on a soul level that happens. Unfortunately, or fortunately sometimes. So when this child is created, you can connect to them anywhere. I mean, they could be on the other side of the planet and you'll know. We always know as parents. So that being said, source is the same way. It's not that far away. It's actually right within you, and that connection happens from within instead of without. Then it doesn't matter what the deep state does. It doesn't matter how many AIs there are out there. It doesn't matter how much mainstream media is being shoved down your throat and narratives are being tossed at you, or how difficult things are around you and the energy is bad and you want to go out into nature where it's clearer. And maybe that works for you too. But making that inward connection, it's always there. And you'll be surprised at that conversation you're going to have when you reach out to source. So no matter how hard they try to block you, there's nothing they can do. There's absolutely nothing they can do.
Love it. All right, guys, that's what I've got for you this week. The latest up-to-date information, like I said, Kim's report just came out today. So now you guys have the latest and greatest. If you want more information about who we are and what we do at United Network, visit our website, unitednetwork.earth. And that, if you choose to become a member, will give you on-demand access to all of our content the moment we put it out there, including complete news updates, our New Earth interviews, Global Intelligence Agency reports, and of course, anything that we release that is about the restoration of our beautiful planet. Thank you so much for being with me today and this weekend. Hope you guys have a lovely holiday if you're celebrating. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.